The morning sun breaks through the smoke-shrouded canopy of Vangunu Island on June 30th, 1943. Steam rises from the jungle floor as marine landing craft grind against the coral beach, their diesel engines mixing with the distant crack of Japanese artillery still echoing from the hills. This tiny speck of land in the Solomon Islands, barely visible on most maps, is about to become the stage for something that will fundamentally alter how wars are fought. Lieutenant Commander William Bill McClure wades through knee-deep surf, his weathered hands gripping a waterproof case containing construction blueprints. At 38, McClure looks more like a Detroit factory foreman than a Navy officer, which makes perfect sense. Before the war, he built bridges and highways during the Great Depression. Behind him, 357 men of the 47th Naval Construction Battalion splash ashore, their faces grim with determination and something else: the quiet confidence of men who know how to move mountains. These aren't typical sailors. The average age is 37, old enough to be fathers to the teenage Marines who secured this beach hours earlier. They're electricians from Chicago, heavy equipment operators from Texas, carpenters from Oregon. Men who learned their trade building America's infrastructure, now tasked with something that seems impossible: carving a fully functional fighter airfield out of solid jungle and coral in a matter of days. McClure checks his watch. 3:15 p.m. The beachhead is secure, but Japanese observers in the hills are already radioing positions back to their commanders. Every hour that passes gives the enemy more time to reinforce, more time to prepare. The Americans need fighter cover for their bombers heading north to hit Japanese strongholds on Bougainville. Without this airfield, those bombers will fly unescorted into a massacre. As McClure surveys the dense wall of tropical jungle before him, ancient trees towering 150 feet into the canopy, their roots intertwined with coral formations harder than concrete. A simple question burns in his mind: how do you build what should take months in just days, while enemy artillery tries to kill you? But here's what: neither McClure nor the Japanese commanders watching from their mountain positions could fully comprehend yet. They're about to witness something that will redefine the speed of warfare itself. Something so shocking that Japanese radio operators will struggle to convince their superiors that their reports are accurate. Something that will force an entire military doctrine, built on the assumption that airfield construction takes months, to crumble in just over a week. The Seabees are about to prove that American industrial might isn't just about factories back home. It's about the ability to project that industrial power anywhere on Earth, turning any piece of ground into a launch pad for victory in a time frame that defies human comprehension. What happens next will leave Japanese commanders asking a question that haunts military strategists to this day. How do you fight an enemy that can turn any captured territory into an immediate threat? To understand the shock that's coming, you have to step inside the Japanese military mindset of 1943. Their entire defensive strategy in the Pacific is built on one crucial assumption: time. When Americans capture an island, Japanese planners know they have months, maybe half a year, before it becomes an operational airbase. This timeline isn't guesswork. It's based on hard experience. In the hills above Vangunu, Captain Hiroshi Yamamoto of the Japanese 8th Fleet's Intelligence Division watches through binoculars as the American landing craft disgorge their strange cargo. Unlike typical military units, these men immediately begin unloading bulldozers, earth-moving equipment, and massive generators. Yamamoto has seen this before. He spent 6 months supervising the construction of the Japanese airstrip on nearby Munda, using traditional methods: teams of conscripted laborers clearing jungle by hand, moving dirt with wheelbarrows, breaking coral with sledgehammers. The Japanese approach to airfield construction is methodical, almost ceremonial. First, surveyors spend weeks mapping the terrain. Then, work gangs clear the jungle tree by tree, burning the debris in controlled fires. Coral and rock are broken up by hand, sorted, and moved using human chains. The process is labor-intensive but proven. Their airfields are solid, permanent installations built to last decades. Yamamoto radios his observations to Fleet Headquarters. Americans landing construction equipment. Estimate 4 to 6 months before airfield operational, consistent with previous patterns. The response crackles back through his radio. Maintain observation. Harass with artillery when possible. Priority targets are their heavy equipment. But as the afternoon progresses, something begins to feel different. The sounds drifting up from the American position aren't what Yamamoto expects. Instead of the methodical chopping of axes and the crackling of clearing fires, he hears diesel engines roaring at full throttle, the explosive crack of dynamite charges, and something else. The high-pitched whine of industrial equipment operating at maximum capacity. Down on the beach, McClure's Seabees are implementing something the Japanese have never seen: American industrial warfare. These men didn't learn construction in military schools. They learned it building the Hoover Dam, laying the Pennsylvania Turnpike, erecting the skyscrapers of Manhattan. They think in terms of deadlines, efficiency, and getting the job done yesterday. Seaman First Class Tony Rizzo, a demolitions expert from Boston's Big Dig project, studies the jungle wall with a practiced eye. Where Japanese engineers see months of careful clearing, Rizzo sees a simple math problem. We need a clearing 3,300 feet long, 150 feet wide, he tells his team. That's about 500 trees, mostly hardwood. Standard dynamite charges, placed strategically at the base, can drop 20 trees simultaneously. He pauses, calculating. We can clear the entire site in 6 hours. The Japanese have never encountered this approach because it requires something their military lacks: an abundance of explosives, heavy machinery, and men trained to use both without supervision. American Seabees don't wait for orders. They see problems and solve them. When Petty Officer Jim Morrison's bulldozer breaks through a coral shelf and uncovers a natural drainage system, he doesn't file a report and wait for new plans. He immediately redirects the entire runway layout to take advantage of the discovery. By nightfall on June 30th, something unprecedented is happening on Vangunu. Floodlights, powered by portable generators, turn night into day. The sound of construction continues around the clock. Japanese artillery tries to disrupt the work, but the Americans simply work around the falling shells. When shrapnel damages a bulldozer, the Seabees drag it aside and keep working. When coral dust clogs air filters, they improvise solutions on the spot. Captain Yamamoto radios headquarters again, his voice betraying confusion. American construction proceeds at unprecedented rate. Industrial equipment operating 24 hours. Estimate. Request verification of standard airfield construction timeline. The response is swift and certain. Maintain current estimates. Americans cannot significantly accelerate standard construction methods. But the Americans aren't using standard construction methods. They're using something revolutionary: the assembly line approach applied to military engineering. Just as Henry Ford revolutionized automobile production by breaking complex tasks into simple, repeated actions, the Seabees have revolutionized airfield construction. Specialist crews work in coordinated waves. Team Alpha clears jungle with explosives and bulldozers. Team Beta follows immediately behind, grading and leveling the cleared ground. Team Charlie lays down the coral foundation, while Team Delta prepares drainage systems. It's industrial choreography on a scale the world has never seen. By July 2nd, just 3 days in, Japanese reconnaissance flights report something that headquarters initially refuses to believe: A rough airstrip is already taking shape. The jungle that stood impenetrable 72 hours earlier has been replaced by a growing scar of white coral and churned earth. American supply ships are arriving daily, offloading not just construction materials, but prefabricated components, sections of steel matting, premixed concrete, even portable fuel systems. The psychological impact on Japanese observers is devastating. Their entire strategic planning assumes they have months to prepare for each new American airbase. Defensive positions are built with this timeline in mind. Reinforcement. Schedules are calculated around it. Supply lines are established based on it. Now, as they watch impossible construction speed unfold below them, a terrifying realization begins to sink in. If Americans can build airfields this fast, then every island they capture becomes an immediate threat. The Pacific Ocean, once Japan's protective barrier, is about to become a highway for American air power. And they have no idea that the most shocking revelation is still to come. July 3rd, 1943, 0600 hours, the fourth day of what will become known in military history as the Vangunu Miracle. Steam rises from the construction site as the tropical sun burns through morning mist, revealing something that shouldn't exist. A nearly complete airfield carved from solid jungle in less than 96 hours. The sound is overwhelming. A symphony of diesel engines, pneumatic hammers, and controlled explosions that can be heard 5 miles away. Lieutenant Commander McClure stands at what will become the runway's midpoint, coral dust coating his uniform like flour on a baker's apron. Around him, his Seabees work with the focused intensity of men who know they're making history. But it's the radio chatter crackling from Japanese positions that tells the real story of what's happening here. Command, this is Observation Post 3. American airstrip now measures approximately 2,000 feet. Repeat, 2,000 feet. Request verification of timeline estimates. The voice belongs to Captain Yamamoto, and for the first time in his military career, uncertainty creeps into his reports. The response from Japanese headquarters comes swift and sharp. Impossible. Maintain observation. Provide photographic evidence. What Yamamoto sees through his binoculars defies every assumption about warfare his military academy taught him. The Americans aren't just building an airfield. They're manufacturing one. Like some massive outdoor factory, teams of specialists work in perfect coordination. When a bulldozer hits unexpected rock, explosives experts are already on site with shaped charges. When coral needs to be compacted, steamrollers appear as if by magic. When drainage becomes an issue, pipe-laying crews materialize with prefabricated solutions. Seabee Chief Petty Officer Frank Tank Thompson, a former foreman on the Golden Gate Bridge, surveys the operation with professional pride. "Back home in San Francisco," he shouts over the noise to a nearby marine observer, "we moved 83,000 tons of steel to build that bridge. Here, we're moving 200,000 tons of coral in 1 week. Same principles, different application. The numbers are staggering. In 72 hours, the 47th Naval Construction Battalion has moved enough earth to fill 15,000 dump trucks. They've detonated over 500 explosive charges with surgical precision, removing massive trees without damaging the underlying coral foundation they need for the runway base. They've laid 3,200 feet of steel matting, each section precisely fitted like pieces of a giant puzzle. But it's not just the speed that's shocking the Japanese, it's the organization. American construction proceeds with the efficiency of a Swiss watch. When Seaman Rizzo's demolition team finishes clearing a section, bulldozer operator Petty Officer Jake Collins is already in position to begin grading. When Collins completes his grading, the steel mat crew led by Chief Morrison is ready to begin laying runway surface. No wasted motion, no waiting for orders, no confusion about responsibilities. Japanese observers have never seen anything like it because their military operates on different principles: rigid hierarchy, detailed planning, careful execution. The American approach seems chaotic from a distance, but up close, it's revealed as something far more dangerous: controlled chaos directed by men who understand both their individual jobs and the overall mission. July 5th brings the moment that changes everything. A damaged F4U Corsair, limping back from a raid on Bougainville with smoke streaming from its engine, spots the white scar of Vangunu's new runway. The pilot, Lieutenant Bobby Morrison, no relation to the Seabee chief, makes a decision that will echo through military history. He attempts an emergency landing on an airfield that officially doesn't exist yet. The radio crackles with urgent transmissions. Unknown airstrip. Unknown airstrip. This is Navy 47 requesting emergency landing. Repeat. Requesting immediate emergency landing. McClure grabs the radio handset, his heart pounding. The runway isn't finished. Still needs final grading on the approach end. Still missing proper lighting. Still lacking fuel systems. But a fellow American is in trouble, and that's all the justification any Seabee needs. Navy 47. This is Vangunu Construction Control. You are cleared for emergency landing. Runway is operational. Repeat, runway is operational. What happens next unfolds in slow motion for everyone watching. The Corsair approaches from the south, its engine coughing and sputtering. Seabees scatter from the runway as the fighter drops lower, lower, until its wheels kiss the coral surface with a spray of white dust. The plane rolls to a stop just 300 yards from the runway's end. Lieutenant Morrison climbs from his cockpit, kisses the ground, and walks over to McClure with a grin that splits his oil-stained face. "Sir, I don't know how you built this field so fast, but you just saved my life." McClure checks his watch. July 5th, 1943, 14:30 hours. Exactly 4 days, 18 hours, and 15 minutes since the first tree fell on Vangunu Island. From his observation post, Captain Yamamoto watches this impossible scene unfold through binoculars that suddenly feel too heavy for his hands. An American fighter has just landed on ground that was impenetrable jungle less than 5 days ago. He reaches for his radio with trembling fingers. "Command, this is Observation Post 3. American aircraft has successfully landed on new airstrip. Repeat, airstrip is operationally complete. Timeline estimate was..." He pauses, struggling with the implications. "Incorrect by approximately 5 months." The silence from headquarters stretches for long seconds before the response crackles back. "Provide photographic evidence. Prepare detailed report. Request immediate strategic reassessment." But the shock waves are just beginning. Within hours of Morrison's landing, American transport planes begin arriving with fuel, ammunition, and maintenance crews. By July 7th, a full squadron of Corsairs is operating from Vangunu. By July 9th, exactly 9 days after construction began, American fighters flying from the impossible airfield are providing escort for bombing runs deep into Japanese-held territory. The psychological impact on Japanese forces is devastating. Radio intercepts reveal the growing panic in enemy communications. American construction capability exceeds all estimates. Previous timeline assumptions invalid. Request immediate revision of all defensive calculations. In military academies across Japan, staff officers are frantically revising strategic doctrines that suddenly seem as obsolete as cavalry charges. If Americans can turn any captured island into an operational airbase in days rather than months, then the entire concept of defensive depth in the Pacific becomes meaningless. One intercepted Japanese naval communication, decoded weeks later, captures the magnitude of their shock. Enemy construction methods suggest industrial capacity beyond our understanding. Previous estimates of American capabilities were fundamentally incorrect. Recommend immediate strategic reassessment of all Pacific defensive positions. As the sun sets on July 9th, McClure's exhausted Seabees watch American fighters take off from their runway for evening patrol. In 9 days, they've accomplished something that Japanese military planners believed impossible. They've proven that American industrial might isn't confined to factories in Detroit or shipyards in Norfolk. It can be projected anywhere American forces land. But most importantly, they've introduced a new weapon into the Pacific War, the weapon of speed itself. Lieutenant Commander Bill McClure never saw his hometown of Detroit again. He was killed 3 months later during the assault on Bougainville, leading his Seabees in building another impossible airfield under enemy fire. But the legacy of those 9 days on Vangunu would outlive every man who participated in them. The psychological impact on Japanese forces was immediate and devastating. Within weeks of Vangunu's completion, intercepted enemy communications revealed a complete revision of Japanese defensive strategy. The assumption that captured islands required months to become operational threats had been the cornerstone of their Pacific defense plan. Now, every American landing became an immediate crisis. Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, no relation to the captain who witnessed Vangunu's construction, reportedly told his staff after receiving intelligence reports about American construction capabilities, "We are not fighting an army or a navy. We are fighting an entire industrial nation that can reshape the earth itself to serve their military needs." The ripple effects spread across the Pacific like shockwaves. American commanders, emboldened by the Seabees' success, began planning more aggressive island-hopping campaigns. Why spend months reducing heavily fortified positions when you could simply bypass them and create new airfields in their rear? The entire strategic map of the Pacific War shifted in those 9 days on a tiny jungle island most people had never heard of. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the Seabees themselves. Word of the Vangunu Miracle spread through every Naval Construction Battalion in the Pacific. The impossible had become possible, and suddenly impossible was just another word for hasn't been tried yet. On Tinian, Seabees would build the world's largest airfield complex, 6 runways capable of launching 500 B-29 bombers in less than 2 months. On Iwo Jima, they would repair battle-damaged runways in 40 minutes while Japanese artillery shells fell around them. The 47th NCB received the Presidential Unit Citation for their work at Vangunu, but the real recognition came from an unexpected source: enemy propaganda. Tokyo Rose, in her nightly broadcasts to American forces, began referring to the Seabees as the devils who move mountains. It was intended as an insult. The Seabees wore it as a badge of honor. Today, when you see rapid deployment of military infrastructure anywhere in the world, airfields in Afghanistan appearing seemingly overnight, forward operating bases materializing in remote locations within days, you're witnessing the direct descendants of techniques pioneered by McClure's men on Vangunu. The U.S. military's ability to project power rapidly to any point on Earth traces its roots directly back to those 9 days in 1943. But the story of Vangunu represents something larger than military history. It's the story of American industrial culture applied to warfare. The belief that any problem can be solved with enough ingenuity, determination, and hard work. The Seabees didn't just build airfields. They built a new way of thinking about what's possible when free people put their minds to solving a problem. Modern military historians still study the Vangunu construction as a masterclass in rapid deployment capabilities. But perhaps more importantly, it stands as proof of something that authoritarian regimes consistently underestimate: the power of individual initiative multiplied by technological superiority and industrial capability. The Japanese weren't just shocked by American construction, speed. They were shocked by American thinking. Their rigid, hierarchical approach to problem-solving couldn't compete with the improvisational genius of men trained to see obstacles as puzzles to be solved rather than barriers to be endured. In 2019, when the U.S. military began developing new concepts for expeditionary advanced bases in the Pacific as part of modern strategic competition, the first historical example cited in planning documents was the 47th Naval Construction Battalion at Vangunu. 76 years later, the same principles that shocked Japanese commanders continue to shape American military doctrine. The jungle has long since reclaimed Vangunu's coral runway. Tropical vegetation grows through the steel matting that once launched American fighters into combat. But the lesson of those 9 days endures. In warfare, as in life, speed of execution can be as decisive as overwhelming force. So the next time you hear someone say, something can't be done, or it's impossible, or it takes too long, remember Lieutenant Commander McClure and his 357 Seabees who proved that impossible is often just a failure of imagination. Because sometimes, the difference between victory and defeat isn't who has the biggest army or the most advanced weapons. Sometimes, it's who can turn impossible into inevitable in 9 days or less.